The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the glass storefront of Riverside Jewelry as Linda Hayes pushed open the heavy door. A soft chime announced her arrival, but the store was quiet, almost empty. Just the way she liked it. Shopping in crowded places always made her nervous, and today she had a specific mission. Her younger sister Katie was getting married in 3 weeks, and Linda still hadn't found the perfect gift. Linda was a simple woman by anyone's standards. At 42, she'd spent the last 18 years teaching second grade at Oakmont Elementary. Her wardrobe consisted mostly of comfortable clothes, practical shoes, and the same hairstyle she'd worn since college, pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail that was now showing more gray than brown. She drove a 12-year-old sedan, clipped coupons from the Sunday paper, and her idea of a splurge was getting the large coffee instead of the medium at her local cafe. But Katie was special. Katie was her baby sister, and Linda wanted to give her something meaningful, something that would last. She'd been saving for months, setting aside a little from each paycheck, and finally had $200 in her purse. It felt like a fortune to her. The jewelry store was far nicer than anywhere Linda usually shopped. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and everything was displayed on deep blue velvet like tiny treasures in a museum. She felt a bit out of place in her faded jeans and old cardigan, but the saleslady behind the counter gave her a warm smile that put her at ease. Linda moved slowly through the store, her eyes scanning the glass cases. Diamond rings that probably cost more than her car, pearl necklaces with price tags that made her stomach flip, gold bracelets that sparkled under the lights like tiny stars. Everything was beautiful, but everything was also way beyond what she could afford. She paused at one display case, drawn to a particularly stunning bracelet. Diamonds, or at least they looked like diamonds to her untrained eye, set in white gold. No price tag visible, which probably meant she couldn't afford it anyway. She leaned closer, admiring how the stones caught the light. For just a moment, she imagined Katie wearing something like that on her wedding day. Then she smiled to herself and moved on. Dreams were nice, but reality was reality. What Linda didn't notice was the police officer standing near the back of the store. Officer Derek Chen had stopped in to pick up his watch from repair, an expensive chronograph he'd saved up for months to buy. He was young, only 28, and he'd been with the police department for just under 4 years. He was ambitious, eager to prove himself, and lately he'd been feeling the pressure. His new captain had been on everyone's case about arrest numbers. Community policing was great and all, the captain had said in last week's meeting, but they needed results. They needed to show they were keeping the downtown shopping district safe. Derek had been working overtime, patrolling the stores, watching for shoplifters. But the thing was, actual criminals were hard to catch. They were careful, quick, professional. So when Derek saw Linda standing at that expensive bracelet display, something clicked in his mind. She looked nervous. She kept glancing around. Her clothes were shabby. She had that look about her, he thought. He'd seen it before. People who came into fancy stores they couldn't afford. People who thought they could get away with something. Derek watched as Linda moved away from the expensive display and headed toward a different section of the store. He stayed back, trying to look casual, pretending to examine his repaired watch while keeping her in his peripheral vision. This is what good police work looked like, he told himself. Being observant, trusting your instincts. Linda finally found what she was looking for in a case labeled Special Occasion Gifts. A delicate silver necklace with a small pendant in the shape of a heart. It was simple but elegant, exactly Katie's style, and the price tag said $89. Perfect. She could actually afford it and still have money left over. She caught the attention of the sales lady, a pleasant woman in her 50s named Helen, who'd worked at Riverside Jewelry for nearly 2 decades. Helen unlocked the case and carefully removed the necklace, draping it over her hand so Linda could see it better in the light. "It's beautiful," Linda said softly. "My sister's getting married. She's not really into flashy things, you know. This is more her style." Helen smiled warmly. "It's one of my favorites. Sterling silver, and that heart pendant has a tiny diamond chip in the center. See it there? Just catches the light perfectly. Very tasteful." "I'll take it," Linda said, and she felt a little thrill saying those words. This was the most she'd spent on a gift in years. But Katie was worth it. Helen wrapped the necklace carefully in tissue paper and placed it in a small velvet box, then slid the box into an elegant shopping bag with the store's logo. Linda pulled out her debit card, the one she used for her checking account, and handed it over. The transaction took less than 2 minutes. Helen made small talk about wedding planning while the payment processed, and Linda found herself relaxing, enjoying the conversation. "You have a wonderful day," Helen said, handing over the bag along with the receipt. "And congratulations to your sister." "Thank you so much," Linda replied. She tucked the receipt into the bag and headed toward the door, already thinking about Katie's face when she opened this gift. She was maybe 3 steps from the exit when everything changed. A figure stepped directly into her path, blocking the doorway. Linda looked up, startled, and found herself face to face with the police officer she'd barely noticed earlier. His expression was hard, almost angry, and his hand was resting on his belt right near his handcuffs. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stop right there." Linda froze. Her first thought was that something must be wrong outside. An accident maybe, or some kind of emergency. "What's happening?" she asked. "Is everything okay?" "I need you to stay right where you are," Officer Chen said, his voice cold and official. "Don't move." Linda's heart started pounding. She looked past him, trying to see if there was a problem in the parking lot, but everything looked normal. People were walking by, getting into cars, going about their day. She looked back at the officer, confused and increasingly frightened. "I don't understand," she said quietly. "What's wrong?" Officer Chen's eyes were fixed on her, studying her face, watching her reactions. "Ma'am, I observed you concealing merchandise in this store. I'm going to need you to put that bag down and empty your pockets." For a moment, Linda couldn't process what he'd just said. The words didn't make sense. "Concealing merchandise?" She looked down at the shopping bag in her hand, the one Helen had just given her at the register. "The one with her receipt inside. I didn't conceal anything," she stammered. "I bought this. I have the receipt." "It's right here in the bag." But Officer Chen was already reaching for his radio. Linda watched in growing horror as he pressed the button and spoke into it. "This is Unit 12. I've got a code 1016 at Riverside Jewelry. Suspect is attempting to leave the premises with stolen merchandise. Requesting backup." The word suspect hit Linda like a physical blow. He was talking about her. He thought she was a thief. Her hand started shaking so badly she nearly dropped the bag. "No, no, no," she said, her voice rising in panic. "This is a mistake. I paid for this. Helen can tell you." She rang me up. "She's right there." She turned desperately toward the counter where Helen was already hurrying over, her face creased with concern and confusion. But Officer Chen held up a hand, stopping Helen in her tracks. "Ma'am, stay back. This doesn't concern you." "But officer," Helen protested, "there must be some kind of mistake. Mrs. Hayes just purchased that necklace from me. I rang up the sale myself not 5 minutes ago." Officer Chen's jaw tightened. He'd gone too far to back down now, not with backup already on the way. "I know what I saw," he said firmly. And in that moment, standing in the doorway of Riverside Jewelry with a police officer treating her like a criminal, Linda Hayes realized that her perfectly ordinary afternoon had just turned into a nightmare. She had no idea that it was about to get much, much worse, or that the consequences of this moment would reach much further than anyone in that store could possibly imagine. Linda's mind was racing, trying to understand how this was happening. She'd done everything right. She'd picked out a necklace, paid for it with her own hard-earned money, got a receipt. How could any of that be construed as stealing? But the officer's face was set in stone, and she could hear sirens in the distance getting closer. "Please," she said, and she hated how small her voice sounded. "Just look at the receipt. It's right here in the bag. I can show you." She started to reach into the shopping bag, but Officer Chen's hand immediately went to his gun, not drawing it but touching it. The gesture was clear. "Keep your hands where I can see them," he commanded sharply. Linda jerked her hand back as if she'd been burned. Tears were starting to blur her vision now. She'd never been in trouble in her life, never even gotten a speeding ticket. And now a police officer had his hand on his gun because of her? Nothing made sense. Helen tried again, her voice more insistent now. "Officer, I really think you need to listen. This lady is a regular customer. She comes in a few times a year. She's never caused any problems. And I personally sold her that necklace. Her payment went through on my register. I can pull up the transaction right now if you'd like, ma'am. I'm going to ask you one more time to step back," Officer Chen said, not even looking at Helen. His eyes were locked on Linda. "I witnessed this woman engaging in suspicious behavior. She was examining expensive merchandise, looking around nervously, acting in a manner consistent with someone planning to steal. "I was just shopping," Linda's voice cracked. "I was looking for a gift for my sister. That's all I was doing." 2 more police cars pulled up outside, their lights flashing. Linda could see people on the sidewalk stopping to stare, pulling out their phones. The thought of being recorded, of this moment being captured and shared, made her feel sick. What would her students' parents think? What would her principal say? 2 officers entered the store, and Officer Chen quickly briefed them. Linda heard him using words that didn't sound anything like what had actually happened. He said she was loitering suspiciously near high-value items, and that she demonstrated evasive behavior when approached. None of it was true, but the other officers were nodding, looking at her like she was already guilty. One of the new officers, older, with gray at his temples, approached Linda. His name tag read Morrison. He seemed less aggressive than Chen, but no less official. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to comply with Officer Chen's instructions. Please place the bag on the counter and empty your pockets." Linda's hands were shaking so badly she could barely function, but she did as she was told. She set the shopping bag on the nearest counter and turned her pockets inside out. A tissue fell out and her car keys, and that was it. The officers looked at the items, then at each other. Officer Chen wasn't satisfied. "Check the bag," he said. Officer Morrison opened the shopping bag and removed the small velvet box. He opened it, revealing the silver necklace nestled in tissue paper. He held up the receipt that was also in the bag, reading it carefully. "This receipt shows a purchase of 1 sterling silver necklace for $89.42, including tax. Purchased today at 2:37 p.m. He looked at his watch. That was about 15 minutes ago. For a moment, Linda felt a surge of hope. They could see she'd paid. This nightmare would end. But Officer Chen was already shaking his head. "That's not what I saw her take," he said. "When I first observed the suspect, she was examining a diamond bracelet in the luxury case. I saw her handling it. When she thought no one was looking, she concealed it. Then she bought that cheap necklace as a cover, so she'd have a receipt in a bag to hide the bracelet in." Linda's mouth fell open. "That's not true." "I never touched that bracelet. I just looked at it through the glass, that's all. I never even asked to see it because I knew I couldn't afford it." Officer Chen turned to Helen. "Where's that diamond bracelet that was in the display case? The one in white gold with the princess-cut stones?" Helen looked flustered. "Which one?" "We have several bracelets in that case." "The one that was in the center of the display. Front and center." Helen hurried over to the luxury case and peered inside. Her face went pale. Oh no. There is an empty spot here. But I don't..." She trailed off, turning to grab a clipboard from behind the counter. She started flipping through papers, her hands moving faster and faster. "We do inventory every morning. Let me just check when that piece was last logged." Officer Chen crossed his arms, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. He glanced at Linda. "You want to tell us where it is now, or do we do this the hard way?" "I don't have it." Linda was crying openly now, not caring anymore about the people watching through the store windows. "I swear I don't have it. I didn't take anything except what I paid for." Officer Morrison looked uncomfortable. "Chen, if she paid for this necklace, maybe we should..." "She's a thief," Chen interrupted. "I know what I saw. She's probably wearing the bracelet under her sleeve or something. We need to search her," Helen called out from behind the counter, still frantically checking her paperwork. "Wait, please, just give me a minute. I need to check something." But Officer Chen had made up his mind. "Ma'am, I'm placing you under arrest for retail theft." "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The words hit Linda like punches. She couldn't breathe. This couldn't be real. People got arrested on TV and movies, but not real people. Not people like her. Not for things they didn't do. "You have the right to an attorney," Chen continued, pulling out his handcuffs. "If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you." "No, please," Linda begged. "Please don't do this. I have a husband. I need to call my husband. He can explain. This is all a mistake." "You'll get your phone call at the station," Chen said. He grabbed her wrist and the cold metal of the handcuff snapped around it. The sound seemed impossibly loud in Linda's ears. He pulled her other arm back and she felt the second cuff close. The metal bit into her wrists. She'd never felt anything like it. The weight of them, the reality of them. Helen finally found what she was looking for in her papers. "Officer, "Officer, please." I found the notation. That bracelet was sent out for repair 4 days ago. It's at Premier Jewelers on 5th Avenue. We sent it out because one of the prongs was loose. It's not even in the store. Officer Chen froze for just a second. Linda saw something flash across his face, uncertainty maybe, or the realization that he'd made a terrible mistake. But then his expression hardened again. "I'll verify that," he said. "But until I do, this arrest stands. She was acting suspiciously, and there's an empty space in that case. That's probable cause." Officer Morrison put a hand on Chen's shoulder. "Derek, maybe we should wait." "If the bracelet isn't even here," Chen shrugged off the hand. "I'm doing my job. There's an empty display slot, and I observed suspicious behavior. By the book, this is a valid arrest." Linda was openly sobbing now, her shoulders shaking. Other customers had come into the store and were staring. Someone was definitely filming. She could see the phone cameras pointed at her. By tomorrow, this would probably be all over social media. Local teacher arrested for theft. Her life was falling apart in real time, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Officer Chen guided her toward the door, one hand gripping her upper arm. Linda's legs felt like they might give out. She turned back toward Helen, desperate. "Please call my husband. His name is Robert Hayes. He works at the Metro Police Division. Please tell him where they're taking me." Helen nodded, tears in her own eyes. "I will. I promise I will." The walk from the store to the police car felt like it took forever and no time at all. People stopped on the sidewalk to watch. Linda heard someone say, "She doesn't look like a criminal." Someone else said, "You never can tell nowadays." She wanted to scream that she wasn't a criminal, that this was wrong, but what good would it do? Officer Chen opened the back door of his patrol car and put his hand on top of Linda's head, guiding her inside the way she'd seen done 1,000 times on TV. The back seat smelled like disinfectant and something else, something unpleasant she couldn't identify. There were no door handles on the inside, no way to open the windows. She was trapped. Through the window, she could see Helen standing in the doorway of the jewelry store, her phone pressed to her ear, making the call to Robert, Linda hoped. Robert would fix this, he had to. He'd know what to do. Officer Chen got into the driver's seat and started the engine. He didn't say anything to Linda, didn't even look at her in the rearview mirror. To him, she was just another arrest, another number to add to his statistics, proof that he was doing his job. As the car pulled away from the curb, Linda closed her eyes and tried to think about anything else. Katie's wedding, her second-grade class, the way little Tommy Patterson had finally learned to read 3-letter words last week. Her garden at home, the tomatoes that were almost ready to pick, normal things, good things, things from a life that felt very far away right now. The drive to the police station took 12 minutes. 12 minutes that felt like hours. Linda watched the familiar streets of her city pass by the window, seeing them from a perspective she'd never imagined. From the back of a police car, in handcuffs, arrested. The holding cell was small, maybe 8 feet by 10 feet, with concrete walls painted a dingy beige that might have been white once, years ago. There was a metal bench bolted to one wall and a toilet in the corner with no seat and no privacy. The smell was awful, a mixture of sweat and fear and cleaning chemicals that didn't quite cover up the other odors. Linda sat on the very edge of the bench, as far from the toilet as she could get, and tried not to fall apart completely. The handcuffs had been removed, at least, and her wrists ached where the metal had pressed into her skin. There were red marks there, already starting to bruise. She rubbed at them absently, still not quite believing any of this was real. Through the small window in the cell door, she could hear the normal sounds of the police station. Voices, laughter, phones ringing. Life going on as usual for everyone else. Meanwhile, she was locked in a cage like an animal, like a criminal. She kept thinking about her students. Tomorrow was Wednesday. She was supposed to be reading them the next chapter of the book they'd been working through together. The one about the mouse who wanted to be a knight. She was supposed to help little Amy with her math facts. She was supposed to check on David's science project. What would happen if she wasn't there? What would they tell the children? And Katie. Oh God, Katie, what would her sister think when she found out? Katie had always looked up to Linda, always saw her as the responsible one, the steady one, the one who had everything figured out. Now Katie would hear that her big sister had been arrested for shoplifting. It didn't matter that it wasn't true. The arrest itself was enough to stain everything. Time moved strangely in the cell. Linda had no way to know how long she'd been sitting there. Could have been 20 minutes. Could have been 2 hours. No windows, no clock, just fluorescent lights that hummed and flickered overhead and made everything look slightly unreal. Finally, after what felt like forever, she heard footsteps approaching. A key rattled in the lock and a different officer appeared. This one was older, with a kind face that gave Linda the first tiny spark of hope she'd felt since this nightmare began. "Mrs. Hayes, you're allowed one phone call. Come with me, please." Linda stood on shaky legs and followed him down a corridor to a small room with a table and 2 chairs. There was a phone on the wall, the old-fashioned kind with a cord. The officer gestured to it. "You've got 5 minutes," he said, not unkindly. Then he stepped outside but left the door open. Watching but giving her some privacy, Linda's hands trembled as she lifted the receiver and dialed. She knew Robert's direct office number by heart. They'd been married for 20 years. She must have called that number 1,000 times. But never like this. Never from a police station where she was being held. Where she was a prisoner. The phone rang once. Twice. Please be there, Linda thought desperately. Please pick up. 3 rings. 4. Then, Robert Hayes. His voice, so familiar and solid and real, nearly broke her. "Robert," she whispered, and her voice cracked. "Robert, I'm at the Central Precinct. Something terrible has happened." She heard him shift in his chair, heard the instant change in his tone, the calmness that came over him when something was wrong. It was the voice he used in crisis situations, the one that meant he was focusing completely. "Linda, what's going on? Are you hurt?" "No, I'm not hurt, but Robert, I've been arrested." The words felt impossible even as she said them. "They're saying I stole something from a jewelry store, but I didn't. I swear to you I didn't. I bought a necklace for Katie. I paid for it. I have the receipt. But this officer, he said I took a bracelet and he arrested me, and Robert, I'm so scared." She was crying again, trying to keep her voice down but unable to stop the words from tumbling out. 20 years of marriage, and Robert had never heard her like this. She'd always been the calm one in their relationship, the steady one. He was the one who dealt with crises at work. Her life was classroom management and parent-teacher conferences. Safe things. Normal things. "Linda, listen to me carefully." Robert's voice was steel wrapped in velvet, calm, but with an edge underneath that Linda recognized. It was the voice he used when he was very, very angry, but keeping it controlled. "I need you to do exactly what I tell you. Are you listening?"
"Yes," Linda managed. "Don't say anything else to anyone."
"Not one word. Don't explain. Don't defend yourself. Don't try to tell your side of the story. Nothing. Do you understand? I don't care who asks you questions or what they threaten. You keep your mouth shut until I get there." "Okay," Linda whispered. "I'm leaving right now. I'll be there in 15 minutes. You're going to be fine. I promise you, Linda, you're going to be fine. Can you hold on for 15 minutes?" "I think so." "Good. I love you. Don't say anything to anyone." The line went dead. Linda hung up the phone and turned to find the officer waiting in the doorway. "All done?" he asked. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. He led her back to the cell, and the door clanged shut behind her with a sound that felt very final. But at least now there was a light at the end of the tunnel. Robert was coming. Robert would fix this. Meanwhile, across the city in the main Metro Police Division headquarters, Robert Hayes sat at his desk and stared at his phone for exactly 3 seconds. Then he stood up, grabbed his jacket, and walked out of his office. His assistant looked up in surprise as he passed her desk. "Chief Hayes, your 3 o'clock meeting. Cancel it," Robert said without slowing down. "Cancel everything for the rest of the day." He didn't stop to explain. Didn't stop at all until he was in his car and pulling out of the parking garage. As he drove toward the Central Precinct, his mind was working through the situation like the trained investigator he was. His wife arrested for theft. Linda, who volunteered at the food bank twice a month. Linda, who cried during sappy commercials and felt guilty if she accidentally kept an extra nickel when the cashier gave her the wrong change. Someone had arrested her for stealing. Either someone had made a catastrophic mistake or something deeply wrong was happening, and given the precinct she'd been taken to, given the timing, given everything, Robert had a sinking feeling he knew which officer might be involved. Derek Chen, young, ambitious, and lately increasingly reckless in his pursuit of arrests. Robert had been watching Chen's record with growing concern. The officers' arrest numbers had spiked in recent months, which should have been good. Except when Robert looked at the details, something felt off. Too many arrests that resulted in dropped charges. Too many situations where the evidence seemed thin. Like Chen was grabbing people just to make his numbers look good. If Chen had done this to Linda, Robert's hands tightened on the steering wheel. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm and think clearly. Getting angry wouldn't help Linda. What she needed now was her husband to walk into that precinct and fix this mess professionally and efficiently. But someone was going to answer for this. That much was certain. Robert pulled into the central precinct parking lot and took a moment to compose himself. Then he walked inside through the main entrance, deliberately not using the back entrance that command staff typically used. He wanted to see how a regular citizen was treated when they came looking for information about a detained family member. The lobby was busy. A woman was arguing with an officer at the desk about a parking ticket. Two young men sat in plastic chairs against the wall looking nervous. An elderly man was trying to file a report about something, his hands shaking as he held his paperwork. Robert got in line and waited his turn. When he reached the desk, the sergeant on duty, Tom Morrison, looked up with his standard professional expression. Then recognition dawned, followed immediately by confusion and concern. "Chief Hayes, sir, I didn't expect. Is there something I can help you with?" "My wife was brought in earlier today," Robert said calmly, keeping his voice level and professional. "Linda Hayes. I believe she's being held on a theft charge. I'd like to see her." Morrison's face went through several shades of pale. He started typing frantically on his computer, pulling up records. "Sir, I had no idea the woman Chen brought in was your wife. She didn't mention, or maybe she did, and Oh God, who made the arrest?" Robert asked, though he already knew the answer. "Officer Derek Chen, sir. He brought her in about an hour ago. Charged her with retail theft from Riverside Jewelry. Sir, if I'd known she was your wife..." Robert held up a hand. "Where is she now?" "Holding cell 3, sir." "Do you want me to? Should I?" Morrison was clearly flustered, unsure of protocol when the chief of police showed up asking about his own wife being held in custody. "I want to see the arrest report," Robert said. "I want to see any body camera footage if Chen was wearing his camera. I want to speak to everyone involved in the arrest. And I want you to get Linda out of that cell and into a private waiting room. Now, get her some water, make sure she's comfortable." "Yes, sir. Right away, sir." Morrison was already moving, barking orders to other officers. "And Tom," Robert's voice stopped him. "Get Derek Chen. Tell him to meet me in interview room A and get Captain Reynolds. I want him present for this conversation." Morrison nodded and hurried off. Robert stood in the lobby for a Ming Big was about to go down. Captain Reynolds went completely still. The color drained from his face, and for a moment he seemed unable to speak. When he finally found his voice, it came out strained. "Your wife?" "Chief, I had no idea. Chen didn't mention. The paperwork doesn't indicate." "Of course it doesn't," Robert said, his voice still calm but with an edge that could cut glass. "Because my wife is simply Linda Hayes, elementary school teacher. She's not the police chief's wife when she goes shopping. She's just a regular citizen who should have been treated fairly regardless of who she's married to." Reynolds nodded quickly, swallowing hard. "Absolutely, sir, of course. I've requested all the documentation. Body camera footage is being pulled up now. Chen is on his way to this room." "Good." Robert sat down at the table and folded his hands in front of him. He looked calm, almost relaxed, but Reynolds had worked with him long enough to recognize the signs. The chief was furious. Coldly, dangerously furious. The kind of angry that meant someone's career was about to end. They waited in silence for 3 minutes. Then there was a knock at the door, and Officer Derek Chen walked in. He was still in uniform, his expression confused. When he saw Captain Reynolds, he straightened up a bit, clearly expecting some kind of debriefing about his arrest. Then his eyes landed on the man sitting at the table. Derek Chen didn't recognize Robert Hayes immediately. He'd seen the chief at department meetings, of course, but always in uniform or formal attire. Right now, Robert was wearing jeans and a casual button-down shirt, having been off duty when Linda called. It took Chen a few seconds to place the face. When recognition finally hit, Chen's confident expression faltered. "Chief Hayes?" "Sir, I didn't know you were. Is this about the arrest I made today?" "Sit down, Officer Chen," Robert said quietly. There was something in his tone that made Chen move quickly to take a seat across from Robert. Captain Reynolds closed the door and stood against the wall, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. "Let me make sure I understand the situation correctly," Robert began, his voice measured and calm. "At approximately 2:45 this afternoon, you arrested a woman at Riverside Jewelry on charges of retail theft. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir," Chen said, and some of his confidence was returning. This was his arrest. He'd done his job. "I observed suspicious behavior and made a judgment call based on my training and experience. Walk me through it. Everything you saw, everything you did. Take your time and be very specific." Chen leaned forward slightly, settling into what he clearly thought was going to be a routine account of a good arrest. "I was at Riverside Jewelry picking up my watch from repair. While I was there, I observed a female subject acting suspiciously near the high-value display cases. She was dressed in shabby clothing, appeared nervous, kept looking around to see if anyone was watching her." Robert's expression didn't change. "Go on." "She spent several minutes examining an expensive diamond bracelet in the luxury case. She was very focused on it. Then she moved to a different part of the store and purchased a low-value item, a necklace for $89. I recognize this as a classic shoplifter technique, purchasing a small item to get a receipt and bag that could be used to conceal more expensive stolen merchandise." "Did you see her take the bracelet?" Robert asked. Chen hesitated for just a fraction of a second. She was handling it in a manner consistent with concealment. Given her behavior, her appearance, and the subsequent discovery that the bracelet was missing from the display case, I had probable cause to make the arrest. "So you didn't actually see her take it?" "I saw enough to establish probable cause," Chen insisted. "The suspect was engaged in suspicious behavior. The merchandise subsequently went missing, and she became defensive when questioned." Robert reached across the table and picked up a folder that Reynolds had brought in. He opened it slowly, deliberately, and began reading. "According to your written report, you stated that you directly observed the suspect concealing merchandise on her person. That's what you wrote. Officer Chen. Not that her behavior was consistent with concealment. You stated that you directly observed it." Chen shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "That's correct, sir. Based on my observation of her movements and behavior, did you or did you not see her physically take the bracelet and put it somewhere on her person? Yes or no?" The room went very quiet. Chen looked at Reynolds, then back at Robert. "The totality of circumstances led me to conclude, yes or no, Officer Chen?" Chen's jaw tightened. "I observed behavior consistent with theft, and the merchandise was subsequently found to be missing." "That's not what I asked." Robert's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath it now. "I asked if you saw her take it. It's a simple question that requires a simple answer." "No," Chen finally admitted. "Not directly." "But," Robert held up a hand. "Thank you for that honest answer. Now let me share some information with you. I called Riverside Jewelry while I was driving here. I spoke with Helen Brennan, the sales clerk. She's worked there for 19 years with a completely clean record. She confirmed that my wife, Linda Hayes, the woman you arrested, purchased one silver necklace and paid for it in full with her debit card. She has the transaction record, the receipt, the credit card authorization, everything." Chen started to speak, but Robert continued. "Helen also checked her inventory logs. That diamond bracelet you claim was stolen? It was sent to Premier Jewelers on 5th Avenue for repair 4 days ago. There's a work order, a receipt, everything documented. I called Premier Jewelers myself. They confirmed they currently have that bracelet. One of the prongs was loose. It's being repaired and will be returned to Riverside Jewelry tomorrow." The color was draining from Chen's face now. "But there was an empty space in the display case. I saw it." "Helen saw it." "Yes, there was an empty space," Robert agreed, "because the bracelet was sent out for repair, which Helen tried to tell you at the time, if I understand correctly. But you didn't want to listen to her, did you?" Chen opened his mouth, then closed it again. He was beginning to understand just how much trouble he was in. Robert opened the folder and pulled out several photographs. "These are stills from the store's security camera. This is my wife entering the store at 2:32 p.m. He slid the first photo across the table. "This is her looking at the display case where the bracelet would have been, except it wasn't there. Note that she's not touching anything. She's just looking through the glass." He slid another photo across. "This is her at the counter making her purchase. And this is her receiving her bag from Helen at 2:41 p.m. At no point in any of this footage, which I've now reviewed completely, does she ever touch the bracelet case, open the bracelet case, or go anywhere near where the bracelet would have been stored in the back. Chen was staring at the photos, his face now completely pale. I was certain. She looked suspicious. She was nervous. She was nervous because she was shopping in a store that was nicer than what she's used to. Robert said, his voice hard now. She's an elementary school teacher, Officer Chen. She'd saved up for months to buy a gift for her sister's wedding. She was nervous because she was spending more money than she usually does on a gift. That's not a crime. That's not suspicious behavior. That's just a woman trying to do something nice for her sister. Captain Reynolds spoke up from his position by the wall. Chen, did you run her ID before making the arrest? Did you check for any prior record? Chen shook his head mutely. If you had, Reynolds continued, his voice tight with barely controlled anger, you would have found that Linda Hayes has no criminal record whatsoever, not so much as a parking ticket. She's been teaching at Oakmont Elementary for 18 years. She volunteers at the homeless shelter. She's active in her church. She is literally the last person in the world who would shoplift a bracelet. Robert leaned back in his chair, studying Chen carefully. Here's what I think happened. I think you've been feeling pressure to increase your arrest numbers. I think you saw a woman who looked like an easy target. Someone who wouldn't fight back. Someone who probably wouldn't have the resources to cause problems. And you decided to manufacture probable cause to make an arrest that would look good on your record. No, sir. That's not... Chen started. I'm not finished. Robert's voice cut through Chen's protest like a knife. You saw what you wanted to see. You ignored evidence that contradicted your assumption. When the sales clerk tried to tell you that you were wrong, you dismissed her. When my wife tried to show you her receipt, you treated her like she was resisting arrest. You handcuffed an innocent woman, paraded her through a store in front of other customers, put her in the back of a police car, and locked her in a cell. All because you wanted an easy arrest. Chen was shaking his head, but he couldn't seem to form words. Everything Robert was saying was hitting too close to home, reflecting choices Chen had made in the moment that suddenly looked very different in retrospect. Do you know what false arrest is, Officer Chen? Robert asked. It's a civil rights violation. It's when a police officer detains someone without probable cause. And right now, looking at all of this evidence, I don't see probable cause. I see assumptions, I see bias, and I see a rush to judgment. Sir, I was doing my job, Chen managed to say. I made a judgment. Robert watched as another officer escorted Chen out of the interview room. The door closed behind them with a soft click, leaving just Robert and Captain Reynolds in the suddenly quiet space. Reynolds let out a long breath, running a hand over his face. Chief, I don't know what to say. This is a disaster. If I'd known, if anyone had realized. That's exactly the problem, Captain. Robert interrupted, turning to face him. It shouldn't matter that she's my wife. Every person who walks into a store, who interacts with our officers, deserves to be treated with respect and fairness. The fact that Linda is married to me shouldn't be what saves her from a false arrest. The fact that she's innocent should be enough. Reynolds nodded slowly. You're absolutely right, sir. What do you want me to do? I want you to pull every arrest Chen has made in the past year. I want them reviewed by Internal Affairs with fresh eyes. Look for patterns. Look for other cases where charges were dropped or where the evidence was thin. I have a feeling we're going to find that my wife isn't the first person he's done this to. She's just the first person who happened to have connections that couldn't be ignored. I'll get started on that immediately, Reynolds promised. And sir, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. This should never have happened. Robert's expression softened slightly. I know you are, Tom. Now I need to see my wife. Is she still in that cell? No, sir. Morrison moved her to a private waiting room as soon as you arrived. Room 118. Robert nodded and left the interview room, walking through the corridors of the precinct with purpose. Officers he passed looked at him with a mixture of respect and curiosity. The story was already spreading. By tomorrow, everyone in the department would know what had happened. He found room 118 at the end of a hallway. Through the small window in the door, he could see Linda sitting in a chair, a bottle of water untouched on the table in front of her. She was staring at nothing, her arms wrapped around herself, and the sight of her like that made Robert's chest ache. He opened the door quietly. Linda looked up, and when she saw him, her face crumpled. She was on her feet in an instant, and Robert crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms. She clung to him, shaking, and he could feel her tears soaking through his shirt. "I've got you," he murmured into her hair. "You're safe now. I've got you." They stood like that for a long moment, Linda crying silently while Robert held her, one hand stroking her back in slow, soothing circles. Finally, her breathing steadied and she pulled back slightly, looking up at him with red, swollen eyes. "Robert, it was so awful." He wouldn't listen. "I tried to show him the receipt, I tried to explain, but he just kept saying I was lying. And then everyone was staring at me and he put those handcuffs on me and—" She shook her head, unable to finish. "I know," Robert said gently. "Helen from the jewelry store called and told me everything. Linda, I am so sorry this happened to you. That officer had no probable cause to arrest you. He made a terrible mistake and he's going to face consequences for it. But why?" Linda's voice was small, confused. "Why did he do this?" "I didn't do anything wrong. I was just shopping." Robert helped her sit back down and pulled up a chair close to hers, taking her hands in his. "Because he made assumptions based on how you looked and how you were acting. He saw what he wanted to see instead of what was actually happening. And that's on him, Linda. That's his failure, not yours." "Everyone saw," Linda whispered. "People were recording on their phones. What if it ends up online? What will my students' parents think? What will the school board say?" "Then we'll deal with it," Robert said firmly. "We'll tell them the truth. You were falsely arrested and the charges are being dropped completely. The district attorney has already confirmed they won't be prosecuting because there's 0 evidence of any crime. You did nothing wrong. But the arrest is still on my record, isn't it? Even if the charges are dropped?" Robert's jaw tightened. "I'm going to see what we can do about that. You may be able to get the arrest expunged from your record given the circumstances. And Linda, I promise you this is going to lead to changes. This officer has been making questionable arrests for months. I'm having all of his cases reviewed. If he's done this to other people, they're going to get justice too." Linda nodded, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "I keep thinking about that. How many other people has he done this to? People who don't have someone like you to help them? People who might have just accepted it, pled guilty to something they didn't do because they were scared or couldn't afford a lawyer." "That's exactly what I'm thinking too," Robert said quietly. "And that's why this can't just end with you getting released. There has to be accountability. There have to be changes to make sure this doesn't happen again." A knock on the door interrupted them. Sergeant Morrison poked his head in, looking apologetic. "Chief Hayes?" "Sir, I have the paperwork ready for Mrs. Hayes's release. The charges have been officially dropped. She's free to go." "Thank you, Tom," Robert said. He turned back to Linda. "Let's get you home." They walked out of the precinct together, Robert's arm protectively around Linda's shoulders. The drive home was quiet. Linda stared out the window, watching the city pass by, still processing everything that had happened. It felt surreal, like the whole afternoon had been a bad dream. Except the ache in her wrists from the handcuffs was real. The memory of that cell was real. The fear had been real. When they got home, their small house had never looked so welcoming. Linda went straight to the bathroom and took a long shower, trying to wash away the feeling of the police station, the smell of the holding cell, the memory of those handcuffs. When she finally emerged, wrapped in her comfortable old bathrobe, she found Robert in the kitchen making tea. He handed her a cup and they sat together at their kitchen table, the same table where they'd eaten breakfast just that morning. "A lifetime ago it seemed now, Robert," Linda said quietly. "I know you said this officer is going to face consequences, but what does that actually mean? What happens to him?" Robert set down his teacup carefully. "Right now, he's suspended without pay while Internal Affairs investigates. They'll look at all of his arrests, interview people he's interacted with, review body camera footage. If they find a pattern of misconduct, which I believe they will, he'll face departmental charges. That could result in termination. He could also potentially face criminal charges for filing false reports. Will he lose his job? Almost certainly. And he should. Linda, what he did to you wasn't just a mistake. It was a violation of your civil rights. He arrested you without probable cause. Then he doubled down on it even when evidence emerged that you were innocent. That's not the kind of officer we want serving this community." Linda was quiet for a moment, processing that. Then she said, "I feel bad about it." "Isn't that strange? He did this awful thing to me and part of me still feels bad that he's losing his job." "That's because you're a good person," Robert said. reaching across the table to take her hand. You don't want anyone to suffer, even someone who hurt you. But Linda, think about it this way. If we let him keep his job, how many more people might he do this to? How many more innocent people might end up in handcuffs because he wants to make his numbers look good? You're right, Linda said slowly. I know you're right. It's just hard. Over the next few days, Linda tried to return to normal life. She went back to school, where her principal had been incredibly supportive once he heard what happened. Her students were happy to see her, oblivious to everything that had occurred. To them, she was just Mrs. Hayes, their teacher, reading them the next chapter about the mouse knight and helping them with their multiplication tables. But Linda herself felt changed. She jumped every time she saw a police car. She felt anxious in stores, worrying that someone might accuse her of something. The confidence and security she'd always felt in her quiet, ordinary life had been shaken. Robert noticed, of course. He suggested she talk to someone, and Linda started seeing a counselor who specialized in trauma. It helped, slowly. The counselor explained that what Linda was experiencing was normal, that having your sense of safety violated in such a fundamental way took time to heal from. Meanwhile, Robert was true to his word. The internal affairs investigation into Officer Derek Chen expanded quickly. Once they started looking, they found a disturbing pattern. Chen had made 42 arrests in the past 6 months. Of those 42, 17 had resulted in dropped charges or not guilty verdicts. That was an unusually high percentage, and when investigators looked closer, they found similar issues in many of the cases. Thin evidence, assumptions instead of facts, arrests that seemed designed to pad statistics rather than serve justice. 4 people came forward with complaints similar to Linda's. They'd been arrested by Chen on questionable grounds, but without resources or connections, they'd felt powerless to fight back. One man had pled guilty to a crime he didn't commit simply because he couldn't afford bail and couldn't miss work. A college student had accepted a plea deal to avoid the cost of a trial. These stories broke Robert's heart and strengthened his resolve. Chen was terminated from the police department after the invest.